the bat, so that it will be available to you on our website afterwards. And you are welcome to take a look at that and share amongst your peers and those that weren't able to attend. Welcome. I'm Jasmine Mendez, the Director of Learning Strategies and Design at the JVLA. And we have with us this afternoon Jim Schur and Jen Siebel discussing with you innovative tech use policies at their schools and some of the strengths and challenges that they've encountered over the last year or so. So we're going to go ahead and start, as we usually do in our meetings, with prayer. And so we'll just take a moment and reflection here. Lord Jesus, teach me to be generous. Teach me to serve you as you deserve, to give and not to count the cost, to fight and not to heed the wounds, to toil and not to seek for rest, to labor and not to seek reward, except that of knowing that I do your will. Amen. So just for those of you that may be new to the JVLA or have not attended one of our webinars before or are learning about us, just wanted to quickly review kind of what part of the process and what area of professional development this falls under regarding sort of our JVLA model. So on the left-hand side of this wonderful color-coded chart here, you know, at the JVLA we follow the IPP, experience, reflection, action, and evaluation. And, you know, we provide a variety of professional development opportunities. And starting from the left, there's research and theory. We look at that with low engagement and sort of just the ability to share information and knowledge. And that's kind of where this falls. It falls in between research and theory and demonstration, in the sense that sometimes with our webinars, we are looking at some best practice strategies, or we're looking at a specific lesson plan or a modeling of some kind of activity. And so folks are able to really discuss and think and question something, but also maybe perhaps take something back to their own classrooms. But really it's about that sort of experience, reflection, seeing what others are doing, and kind of having a dialogue with it. As we move towards the right of the green chart here, we look at, you know, practice and coaching and mentoring, and a lot of our facilitated courses, as well as some of our self-paced courses, allow the opportunity for participants and educators to practice what they learn. And so those courses that are offered through us allow teachers to learn something, collaborate and communicate with other teachers, educators from around the country and around the globe, actually, at times, and then take what they've learned into the classroom practice. And then the final phase is where those same teachers and educators that have taken some courses with us are wanting to help and coach and mentor and facilitate our courses for other teachers. And so that commitment there, as you see on the bottom of the screen, is high level of engagement and commitment versus where we are today, which is kind of just that demonstration, low engagement, but obviously of high interest to many people, because we have a great number of folks online with us today. And so we appreciate you taking the time to come to learn what you can and to engage in this dialogue and to share this experience with us. So today's format will be a formal presentation by our lovely presenters, Jim and Jen, followed by a Q&A. You are welcome, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see a chat function, and some of you have already used it. Thank you for that. You're welcome to type in your Q&A questions there. There should also be a Q&A box that you can use to do that. And we will save questions for the end, but I'm sure that if Jim or Jen sees a question in the chat box that they want to address right away during the presentation, they will probably do so. For audio purposes, to prevent feedback, since webinars usually contain a lot of people online, all microphones except for the presenters have been muted. So again, please use the chat or Q&A box to comment there. So just very briefly, this webinar is going to focus on St. Xavier's implementation of their one-to-one program and how they have found that they needed to kind of change some of their policies based on what they were observing in their classrooms and at their school. They really wanted to be able to challenge their students to develop the whole person and to have relationships with each other. And as I'm sure many of you have seen, with the invention and use of technology daily in our lives, we are struggling with that, you sort of human to human contact and connection, I think. And so they have this school year implemented a new policy that challenges the way the students use their devices. And today they will focus on what that process was like and share some of the challenges and successes of that. So I will pause my sharing here and allow Jim and Jen to take it away.
Thanks, Jess. Hold on just a moment while I get this share screen. There we go. All right, so welcome to this webinar. We're calling it Look Up. You obviously get the irony of kids staring at their phones and their devices all the time. So this is just going to be a quick walkthrough of what we've done really over the last 12 months. Jen, I'll let you go ahead.
Just to introduce ourselves, and I have laryngitis, so if you can't hear me at all, if somebody could type that in the text box. I picked a great day to get laryngitis.
Oops.
My name is Jen Ziebel, and I'm the Dean of Faculty here. I've been at St. X for about 16 years. I was in the classroom for the first 9, and I've been an administrator for the last 7.
My name is Jim Schur. I'm the Director of Technology Integration, so I do technology professional development. I had the pleasure of being with a few of you last week at our cohort gathering. For those of you, this is a repeat story. I also teach English, one section of sophomores, which is American literature, and I coach cross country and track as well. We did want to point out, we thought the title on the JVLA's end was a little ironic, calling it an innovative approach to technology. If you think of the modern definition of innovative, really this is contrary to that. It's the exact opposite. This is a more pragmatic approach to technology usage, and the way that we decided to mitigate technology's overuse in our school and focus on personal relationships.
So to start off, we thought this was something we were kicking around when trying to figure out a device policy, and this was our first thought.
Oh, come on.
Social media is great. It connects you to the world and the people you love. You can chat with your family or share a meal with friends and watch cute little cats do unbelievable things.
Look, she sticks her head out of the box.
Look, she sticks her head out of the box. But there are times when social media can get in the way of the real world. Remember that? It's the thing that happens when you run out of battery. That's why we've developed the Social Media Guard. It takes the social out of media and puts it back into your life. Let's see how it works. The Social Media Guard. Get yours now.
Are you with us, Jim? Trying to unmute or? Having some slight technical issues to get reloaded here.
If you ever want an example of what not to do in a presentation, don't hit the hang up button instead of the unmute button on your phone. I apologize for that. So we show that in jest, but that was kind of the reality of our school over the last few years. Kids had phones, they had their devices, the iPads that we had them bringing with them. They're walking through the halls, they're sitting around, they're staring at their phones. They're not staring at each other. Their earbuds are on. We were just kind of trying to grapple with how do we as Ignatian educators, as a Jesuit school, focus on the authentic human interaction, on the one-to-one interaction, as opposed to kind of the, quote, one-to-one interaction of staring at screens and transacting assignments, games, silly cat videos, etc. There's an article in the Washington Post yesterday, and the title was Schools and Cell Phones in Elementary Schools at Lunch. And the premise of it, and the lead is up here on the screen, is that essentially schools still don't know what to do with devices in the building. And it chronicled some elementary and middle school schools talking about whether they allow kids to have them out at lunch, whether they allow them in the hallway, whether they don't. And it was really interesting to read it from a, quote, secular perspective and just how they're grappling with these decisions. And looking back on the last year and the decision that we made, it's nice from a perspective of a Jesuit school, of a Catholic school, to have a framework that's helped guide us. Some of you may have seen this document that the Northeast Province published last year called Education for Encounter in a Digital Age. And we really kind of dwelled on this document and used it as some of our guiding foundations. And I put 3 quotes up here in particular that resonated with us as an institution as to why we needed to really do something to curb device usage all the way around, and note that means for students and adults as well, and focus on what we're called to be as Ignatian educators and Ignatian students. Particularly, I like the bottom one: technology can serve us best as educators and students when used as a means to further human connection and personal encounter. And so what is that personal encounter, and what does the personal encounter look like during the school day? As we move through the presentation, there's a few things that you need to know that are unique to St. X. So Jen's going to start us off talking about Flex.
So I'll try. Our lunchtime is called Flex. It's essentially a 1-hour period in between classes when every student in the school is free. We are a student body of over 1,500. So as you might imagine, having that many students free at one time could be a challenge. During that time, students eat lunch, they meet in groups, there are clubs that meet, they study. Our cafeteria cannot hold all those students, really can only hold about half that number. So our students had to find other places to go. Our seniors have off-campus privilege, so some of them were off-campus, but by and large, we discovered, particularly with our freshmen and to a certain degree our sophomores, they were just hanging out in the hallway. Again, yeah, let us know if you can't understand me. So imagine, if you will, hundreds of students in the hallway sitting on both sides with their feet straight out because, you know, that makes good sense. On their devices, many of them, mostly playing games, talking, etc. Not very many of them are doing homework. That's kind of what the culture was like. In a couple areas of the school in particular, it was impossible to get by these students. They were so absorbed, excuse me, in what they were doing that, you know, you had to either, you know, physically bend down and ask them to move their legs for them, or, you know, try to step around them, which proved difficult. Anything else?
one of the things that we were also struck by was our passing time in between classes. Students would leave their class, immediately put their hand in their pocket, grab their phone, start staring at their phones, be bumping into each other, be bumping into adults, or students would have their gigantic Beats by Dre on and be walking through the hall completely oblivious to their surroundings, to each other. We also saw this in our adults as well.
It really seemed to be more of a culture of rudeness. People were not, looking at you, as Jim said. So there was not only a lack of human interaction, but to a degree, a lack of human decency as you're walking by someone else. I can't even count the number of times when someone bumped into me in the hallway because their face was buried in their phone, because they were so preoccupied, not even saying excuse me. So I think a lot of us were put off just by how rude people were being due to the fact that they had technology with them and out all the time.
And then along with that it's also important to talk about our one-to-one development and where we were in the 2016-2017 school year. So in 2014, we launched an iPad one-to-one, and different than some schools, we launched with one class at a time. And it's important to note as well that we were student-owned devices, not school-owned devices. So what that means for those of you that understand this is we didn't have any mobile device management. We didn't have any of those kind of Jamf or cloud-based restrictions happening. And as we scaled up through 3 years, so last year we decided to take a hard look at the devices. Were iPads the right device for students at St. Xavier High School? And over the 3 years that we had the one-to-one, so at that point last year, it was freshmen, sophomores, and juniors had them. We had heard consistent feedback from our students, our parents, our faculty, as well as students that didn't have it, so older students, that they wish they had other devices, that distraction was an issue, that they had to, they would use the iPad in class to start an assignment, but then they'd go home and write their paper on their laptop or their family desktop. So we were kind of balancing all of that along with the culture of rudeness, as Jen put it, the way tech was working in our school. And ultimately, like any good school would do, we formed a committee to decide what to do, because why not put it in committee? Thankfully, though, this was not a example of death by committee. Something actually came out of this. So we created a committee that was representative of all departments. Jen was the representative of administration, and we had our director of technology on it as well. Our first semester was spent deciding whether the iPad was the right device for the school. We spent a significant amount of time going back to departments, asking departments questions. We developed a list of what was done on the iPads, what students were currently doing, and we asked ourselves, what can't be done on other devices? And what we found was the only thing that we did on the iPad that was iPad specific was we used Notability as an app to take notes, which we transferred to, in our current state, OneNote for Microsoft. So we talked to teachers, we talked to students, we shopped around in our community, and ultimately the first decision was made. Maybe the most important decision was that for the 2017-2018 school year, we were not going to be an iPad school for our incoming freshmen. And we kept that same model of scaling up with each freshman class. So then next we had to decide, okay, what do we want in a device and what does that mean for us? The biggest thing that we heard on the iPad in terms of productivity was that there was no fully functioning office suite. As our students with iPads got into their upper level courses, the limitations on what their teachers wanted them to do in Excel or PowerPoint versus what they could actually do on the device was huge. And as they were going into their more advanced science courses, they were going to need to be able to use Office more as well. We are a Microsoft Office 365 school. for those that that might matter to. So Google Suites was not something that we were considering. Also kind of limited us from looking at Chromebooks as well. We didn't want to kind of change our whole infrastructure. One of our frustrations with the iPad as well was we used Canvas as our LMS, and there were major inconsistencies with the Canvas app versus what the website could do. And we wanted to move to a platform where teachers and students were doing the same thing in the same way. So, hey, go to Canvas, and that looks the same for teachers and students as we did that. We were also committed to keeping that touch screen functionality. There's research out there about writing, mimicking handwriting leads to better retention for note-taking or working through, so we wanted that as well. Our math and science representatives thought that was absolutely crucial for what they did in tech classroom. So that led us down the line of recommending a Windows 10 touchscreen device. I would say 80 to 85% of our incoming freshmen are bringing in Microsoft Surfaces, whether that be the Surface Pro 4 or the Surface Book, mostly the Surface Pro 4. And so we switched to the Windows 10 touchscreen. We're still on the families buy their own model. We did not invest in school-owned. Our administration did not want to go down that route and more staffing to take care of that. And so we wanted it to be student-owned. That allowed for a little freedom and flexibility and price points as well for families as they decided what was best for them. One thing that was interesting too that we kind of sought to debunk was the myth of the Windows device not being a gaming device. So there's a natural inclination from our committee and others that we talked to that, hey, if we move away from the iPad was meant for entertainment and content consumption, but if we go to a full laptop, then these kids are never going to play games. And we tried to work really hard to say, look, here's a Windows Store. They can go down in and download these games, and that's still going to happen. Whether or not it's an iPad or another device, they'll still find ways. But we looking at it within the sphere of productivity, we decided that the Windows 10 was a good move for us. And this webinar isn't really about that, but if anyone wants to touch base offline, I'd be happy to talk more about our process. We've had good success so far in the first 3 months with the freshmen using Windows 10. It was a smoother transition than we thought for our faculty and our students. A little bit of a learning curve. I'd say the biggest one was the transition from Notability to OneNote. But other than that, things have been running fairly smooth.
So we spent the entire second semester really talking about culture. And so, we're trying to figure out how can we improve our culture and where do we need to improve our culture. So we decided right away that what was happening in the classrooms was completely off limits to our committee. How teachers wanted to manage device usage in the classroom was up to them. And because we had a committee with teachers from all departments, we want teacher buy-in. Easiest way to kill a committee is to, have the teachers hate what you're doing from the very beginning. So, and again, the culture of the classrooms itself was not really what we were talking about. And we were hoping at the very least that the new device would help facilitate a better classroom culture, less game playing, et cetera, anyway. So we decided to focus on the hallways.
Okay. So what we heard from our feedback over and over was the need to look at our hallways. And this is a picture of a barren hallway. But if you can visualize students sitting on the floor, as Jen said earlier, legs out, heads in their devices, staring, not talking at each other. And so it became, as we were working through kind of this literal, symbolic, it just was the crucial crux point of the issue. So we knew we needed to address the hallway. The question was, well, what do we need to do? As Jen mentioned with our flex time, every student was free all the time, and there weren't enough places in our building for students to sit during flex. The library only holds 120 Cafeteria holds about 700. Classrooms were open if clubs were meeting, but if there were no clubs meeting, classrooms were off limits. Some kids were in the weight room during flex, but we still had hundreds and hundreds of kids with nowhere to go during flex. We also had students use the hallways during free periods. One of our values as a school is personal freedom and choice, and so we're on an 8-bell rotation, and most students have 6 classes, and so they'll have 2 free periods, sometimes 2 in one day, sometimes 1 in one day, along with flex. We don't monitor them. We don't make them go to the library or to a study hall room, and so they can go wherever they want. And often students were choosing the hallway as a place to go. We also found, too, we heard from students that, look, even though we're in the hallway, it's not conducive to doing homework. We're lying, we're reclined, it's just not comfortable. So we knew that if we were going to look at the hallway as a place to remove technology, we needed to increase the amount of seating that we had in our building. So we spent a considerate amount of time, hang on, too fast, looking at places, and I'll show some images in a little bit where we can add, seating to the building, where we could kind of alleviate that tension. And so this was, we came up with a policy, and this is it as written in our handbooks. And what we did is we looked at time and space. So where are the zones for timing and spacing where students can and can't use technology? First, we knew that before school and after school were kind of off limits. So we were looking at this during the scope of our school day. And so no technology is in the hallway of the chapel during flex and free bells from 8 to 3 o'clock. Our Dean of Students is very fastidious in terms of wording and language, and so he wanted to make sure that every I was dotted and T was crossed. And so no cell phone during passing time, no earbuds. Where they can use it during flex. So all the lobbies that they were able to use technology in, the fine arts lobby, the gym lobbies, the courtyard. You'll see there rooms 3148, 3150, and 3167. We lobbied our administration and said, look, if we're going to do this, we need classrooms open where students can go and work together. The library is quiet working, but students need to work in groups. One of the benefits of the hallway as it was last year was that if students were working together on something and actually doing homework, they could sit next to each other and talk. By taking that away, we had 2 options. We had the library that was really quiet, and then we had the cafeteria that was loud and boisterous. So we said, we need a middle ground. We need somewhere where they can go. So they said, all right, we'll get a prefect during flex to monitor these 3 classrooms. And to us, those were big classrooms, and those fit about 140 students. One of them in particular has desks for 70 in it. So to us, that was important that students would be allowed to be in there. We also put in there that technology would only be allowed for educational purposes in the library, computer lab, study hall rooms, classrooms. We wanted to be specific and define where and how it could be used. This was important to us. So this was the proposal that we took to our president and our principal. A lot of this, too, we knew as a committee that we were asking faculty to model this. And we were asking faculty to put their phones away during the hallway. I can't tell you how many people would be walking from class to class, pull out their phone, check their phone, look at it real quick, and move on. And so this was not just a culture shift for students, not a do as they say, not as they do, but a real institutional overhaul.
Yeah, and I think it really made us look at our own behaviors. Jim and I had many discussions about, like, I started leaving my phone on my desk because I was in such the habit of pulling it out of my pocket when we were walking through the hallway. Our president, don't tell him I said this, he would often walk through the hallway with his phone out. So, it's pretty bold of us to have to ask our president to say, hey, you got to put that in your pocket or, leave it in your office so you can model good behavior for our students. So,
yeah.
Just to show you a couple of signs that we've created. These are 3 separate signs that are hung in various areas. It's pretty straightforward stuff. So the blue one, they can use, we'll just call it ed tech in those areas. So if they're working on homework or whatever, they can use technology there. If they see the red, and those are posted mostly in hallways, technology is not permitted at all. So no phones. no laptops, no iPads. It should be noted that they are allowed to be in the hallway. So if they actually want to sit next to each other in the hallway and do homework on the floor, not involving technology, or read, or just sit there, that's actually okay. As Jim said earlier, our hallways are not off limits to students, so it's just the technology piece that's not allowed. And then the green would be in places like our cafeteria and our courtyards, where they can use, if they do want to play games or stream videos, they can choose to do those in those areas.
And one of the things that we didn't mention earlier in the process of creating this policy and proposing it, one of the biggest challenges we got, and we got this from our president as well, was, well, what if it's 5 minutes before class starts and a kid's outside and he's studying for the quiz, and all his notes are on his device, and he just needs to pull up the device and study for his quiz. And our response to that was, well, he'll have to go somewhere else and do it. And he'll have to change his behaviors to sit in the library or sit in the classroom until right before the bell rings, and then just move straight to the classroom. So most of the people I'd say were on board with this when we were developing it, when we were proposing it. We did have to answer some questions like that, but on the most part, it was given the green light. Here's an example of a couple more signs that we have hanging in the building for variety, if you will. So this was all done in April and May, and as we moved into the school year, we were kind of wondering, what's the implementation going to be like? How are students going to respond to this? Because if you think about it, for our seniors, this is a complete culture shift. They've gone from 3 years of being able to do whatever they want, and now they have to really focus and refine their behavior. These pictures are kind of, you can see some of the seating that we added in alcoves and balconies to reduce the load of students in the hallway. So we bought some high top counters with outlets, some swivel chairs, some lower tables with chairs, and we have some areas, some spaces that we were able to put this. The nice thing about this as well is that our administration supported this from a fiscal perspective. We said, look, if this is going to be successful, we need to purchase furniture to go in these places. And you guys know classroom institutional furniture is not cheap. It's not like we went to Goodwill and picked the stuff up for $20. So this was a tens of thousands of dollar investment in furniture. And the furniture is well used. The students use it. They're using it appropriately. As I walked through last week before open house, I didn't see any graffiti on some of the new furniture, so I guess that's a good sign.
We also, at the beginning of the year, we tasked our committee, as well as ourselves, with walking around just to see where students would gravitate. We figured there would be some natural places that they would go, and we wanted to make sure that we didn't miss any obvious spots to put some furniture for them. Interestingly enough, the places like the cafeteria, and this has been true as of earlier this week, it's not full. So I'm not actually sure where all these kids are going, but they are, they're filling seats, but it's not overcrowded in any one particular spot, and the hallways are clear, and that has been the case really all year long.
One of the things that was interesting from our perspective on the implementation, we went into this, our dean of students was on board. All right, we're going to give them a grace period. For the first few weeks, we're just going to say, hey, put your phone away, put your device away, move on, and go from there. And we presented this to our faculty in the same way. And one of the things we were very clear to say was that this is formative, not punitive. So the goal of this is not to jug a kid 10 times and to create that antagonistic relationship. The goal of it is to kind of encourage healthy behavior, to have that conversation. So we expected the first few days to be rough. We expected the first few weeks really to be rough, and rough in the sense of lots of reminders. It went better than we thought.
Yeah, it was pretty smooth. All you had to do was give a kid a gentle reminder, and I'm sorry, put their phone back in their pocket. Interestingly enough, we have quarter exams here at St. X, and we don't know why, but for some reason, during exams, which is a different kind of schedule, kids completely ignored the new device policy, and it was so noticeable. After the first 2 days of school, I said to Jim, I think the environment feels really different without devices. And I asked, is this because I want to see this, or is this really a thing? And it seemed like, no, it was a much different feel in the hallways. Well, as soon as those quarter exams hit and the phones came out again, it was that rudeness. And so many people commented how terrible it was. We had to go on the PA and make an announcement about phones and tell them to put them back in their pockets again. So that became pretty clear after just a quarter how effective the policy has become and how we really don't want to go back to the way it was before. So much so that the kids made fun of us. This is a clip from our student newspaper. The backside of the newspaper is kind of their, what do you call it?
Satire.
Yeah, their satire. It's all sarcastic stuff. So since they made fun of us in our band, we figure it's a pretty good deal.
So some of the things that are interesting as well, like as I was mentioning, the grace period, when we took that grace period off and our dean student says, all right, gentlemen, now you will be receiving jugs if we have to, it was a non-issue. Discipline, in terms of all the jugs written this year, and we have 1,500 students, so it's a hefty amount of jugs, less than 1% of our jugs are due to tech in the hallway. At this point in the school year, it's pretty much a non-issue. Overcrowding is still an issue, but in different ways. So our library ended up getting absolutely slammed to the point where we were kicking students out of the library, which has never happened in the history of the library at St. X. And it became over-slammed, which meant it was loud and busy, and so we had to get an extra prefect in the library during flex and make sure we were at capacity. The 3 classrooms, if you recall from the policy that we opened, we thought those would be filled, and they were pretty much empty. The only reason one of the classrooms was filled was because it had the foosball table in it, and so kids were in there playing foosball. But because the library is overcrowding, we still wanted to have a place for those students to go to when they were asked to leave the library. The 3 classrooms we opened were actually down the hall and a bit away from the library, so we closed those and opened a classroom kind of right across the hall from the library. And that's a smaller classroom, and it's only got 22 desks in it, and that is full every day with the prefect. As Jen mentioned, kids are still in the hallway during flex, and it's a different feel during flex. It used to be quieter because they're playing their games, and now they're standing around talking. So the last 10 minutes of flex before the next bell are actually a lot louder than they used to be because they're actually talking to each other. I think faculty have done a good job modeling the behavior. I think we all have kind of taken each other to task in a gentle, loving way. Some better than others, but for the most part, it's gone well. We don't have any formal data at this point. We just heard stories, and all the stories have been positive. In December, after the Thanksgiving holiday, we're going to do formal feedback sessions. Jen and I have been doing them every year since we've instituted the one-to-one, where we allow teachers just to come in and we buy them lunch and tell us about what's going well, what's not working with technology in their classrooms and the building. So we're really interested to see what is said in these feedback sessions. But other than that, I mean, this was billed as an innovative webinar. I hope you don't feel that it was a bait and switch, because we really just said, hey kids, put your phone away. It's interesting though, looking back on it, how much work we had to go through to get to a point where people felt like, yeah, that's a good policy. It wasn't just a simple, oh, yeah, of course, that makes sense. And I think that's reflective of society, right? Like parents are struggling with how to deal with phones at home, teachers are struggling, coaches are struggling, everywhere is still trying to figure out what is the best balance. And going back to that Jesuit document, I think those foundational quotes helped ground us into human interaction is what's important, and that's what we're going to focus on. So with that, we're done. So I see a few comments, but if there's any questions, we're happy to take them and go from there.
Definitely. Thank you, Jim and Jen. Yeah, so folks are welcome to type up their questions there in the chat or the Q&A section, and we'll be able to address those now. And I'll just give you all a few moments to kind of type those away. But thank you. That was very informative to see where your school was to where it's at now, and sort of those changes and that growth just even in the last few months.
So for students, it was pretty clear it's a detention. Jen, for adults, you want to handle that from the administrative perspective?
Honestly, I mean, I have said to adults, put your phone away. I'm not mean about it. Obviously, I ask them nicely. We've had a couple of adults get snippy about it. I suppose if we heard repeated offenses from the same adult, we would deal with that administratively. But I haven't really had any major issue with adults or students, really.
And the question was, what was the accountability piece on adults or students who didn't follow the no tech policy? There's another question that came in at the Q&A board that said, how long did the process take?
Forever.
It was a committee.
Yeah, it took the better part of the year. So again, we broke it into semesters. We actually reformed the committee this year. So it disbanded and then reformed, and we're going to meet monthly just to kind of check in. But we met every couple of weeks, like every other week, for most of last year, with one semester focused on our choice of device, and the second semester devoted entirely on culture. We also did some work kind of offline, looking probably into some of your schools and seeing what kind of policies other Jesuit schools specifically had in place, what kind of signage was up there, and then just through other connections we had, what people noticed about what was happening in their schools.
Yeah, another school who should be doing this or presenting as well as St. Louis University. We got a tremendous amount from them as well. The culture piece was interesting because even working with the committee and the committee members, there are some deeply held beliefs on device usage that we had to get past from the teachers that felt like we really shouldn't have devices and we should lock them down completely so they can't do anything on them, to the teachers that are like, hey, kids can do whatever they want, we do whatever they want. So it was interesting as we tried to massage and work through that in the committee.
Another question that just came in. We don't allow phones during the school day. We do have a lot of non-academic device usage. No devices in cafeteria during lunch. Do you think phones drive a bigger issue than devices?
I guess that sort of depends. Years ago, I remember when, I used to have a contest with another teacher to see how many phones we could confiscate during the school day. And that just became not very realistic because students all have them, we all have them. I think, at least with our students, the fact that they're given a little more freedom and responsibility, they tend to respond to that. Since phones are not taboo, I don't think they really try to hide them too much. I still teach a class during the day, and they are welcome to have their phones out until the bell rings, and then they have to go away. And I really don't have to tell them again. They know that they have to be put away. But that onus is on me to make sure that my students are clear that, yeah, you can use it at the beginning, but as soon as we start, put them away and that's it. And they don't see me on my phone either. So if I'm modeling the behavior, they seem to be on board with it.
I agree, and I think maybe from a tech end, a lot of our kids use their phones on their data plans to get around our filter. Like, let's just acknowledge that and call that what it is, but we can chase it all along and they'll always find a way. But Jen's right, they're really good about putting it away. If they're in the library and the librarian asks them to put it away, not to use it in the library, it's not an issue.
I think they appreciate their freedom. They know that if we wanted to, we could take that, take that freedom away from them. So they're not, I don't think they're willing to play that game with us.
Great, thank you. Did you have students on your committee?
We had student visitors, so we didn't have any standing students on the committee, just so that they didn't have to listen to all of us faculty members go back and forth and arguing with each other. But we did bring students in at multiple points to talk about for the first one, the device choices, and we brought in students from different grades and asked them about their device usage. And then for the culture one, it was really interesting. In the spring, when I was when we were working at culture, I was also coaching track, and a son of one of our committee members was on the track team. And so I get out to the track one day, and he's got the whole team riled up because he heard from his mom that we were taking away their phones and they weren't going to be able to use their phones. And everyone just accosted me. Are you taking our phones away? We can't use our phones. I said, no. We're just going to say we can't use it. You can't use them in the hallway. And the looks of relief on their face were like, oh, all right, we're good. And we gathered feedback. We talked to student council and some our junior, senior leadership groups that run homeroom as well. And so we gathered feedback that way.
Great, thank you. Any other, I think we have one that came in on the Q&A board. Jeff asks, what are you using to measure success of this? Are there some objective measures along with the subjective indicators you mentioned? Not that witnessing students' changes in behavior isn't good enough. But
It's a really good question. We don't know. We've been kicking that around in our committee ourselves. What are our metrics for this? What are our metrics for success? One of the things that we are going to look at, and it's again another qualitative piece, but it is worth looking at. Every year we do senior exit interviews where seniors sit in a group of 8 to 10 with a couple faculty members, and basically we ask them, what's gone well for you at St. X? What hasn't gone well? How can we change things? And we hold pretty true to that, and we'll take notes, compile the notes, and we've made policy changes and we've changed programming based on that feedback. And over the last 3 years, we've heard consistently from the seniors, like, man, I'm glad I didn't have an iPad. All those kids in the hallway, all the freshmen just kind of staring at each other or staring at their devices. So it'll be really interesting for us to hear this year what the seniors say in those exit interviews about the hallways, about kind of how the culture has changed from where it was to where it is now. Again, still qualitative, but it's something.
thank you. We've got another one that just came in. I think you might be able to see it. Says, I would include future employers in your assessment. What future workplace are you all preparing the students for? In the hallways of future jobs, would they institute no technology?
That's a really good point. Thanks, Jen. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, so any other last questions, thoughts, or comments? Perhaps. Okay, I'm gonna, there may be some folks still typing away, but I just wanted to share momentarily while those maybe come in. If you enjoyed this webinar, we do have one more this fall coming up next week, actually, and it's going to be a panel discussing the classroom partnering to build a culture of encounter, a hybrid model of inter-school collaboration. I'm not sure, Jeff, if you wanted to say anything about that. I don't know if you can, actually, never mind, because you're muted. But I know that there'll be a couple of schools there from different schools talking about their inter-school collaboration. So that's next week, Tuesday, November 21st, 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 Central, 12 Pacific. And you can register just like you did for this one. I believe there should be a link on our website at jvla.org under our professional development category there. You can also email me at jmendez@jvla.org and I can get you that information for next week's webinar. We're also currently planning and working on our spring courses, facilitated courses that we offer 3 week 4 and 6 week courses that are available to all educators in our network. And please stay tuned for that because we have some exciting things coming up in the spring here. So I think we maybe have a question or a thank you. Let's see. Just from Tim, appreciate what you guys are doing. We're on a parallel track at SLU. The big looming issue for us is parent outreach. How can we help parents set the limits and ultimately encourage this kind of freedom at home? Most of them are really lost and overwhelmed.
Yeah, we're parallel as well. I've been working with our principal and the Mothers Club as well, saying what would a parent education around technology look like? Would it be more formative? Would it be more, here's how to use tech, here's how to monitor tech? I mean, we're in the planning stages of that right now as we speak. So, and I don't know what it is yet. We're not there yet for me to share. So it's still in the incubation stage.
Thank you. So before we head up, if there's any other last questions, comments, concerns? Again, this webinar was recorded. We will post that on our jvla.org website, and you're welcome to look at it there and share the link with your other colleagues if they were unable to attend today. And Jim and Jen, would they have access to, would be okay to share your emails or information if they have other questions after the webinar?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Awesome. So we can get that. So if you're willing, if you're wanting to ask them further questions, we can pass along their contact information, at least email, so that if you have questions after this, you can share, you can ask. So, all right. Well, thank you again, Jim and Jen, for your time and for this wonderful discussion about what you're doing and what's worked and challenges, et cetera. And we hope that folks, went away with something to at least think about and present to their own faculty and staff, perhaps. So, any last thoughts or things you want to share?
Nope.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
All right. Thank you, guys. Everyone have a great afternoon, and we hope to see you at our next webinar.
All right.